Enjoy your time here and find peace in the stories we tell. If you liked the story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to support the channel. Father, I will not marry Arthur Shen. That was the very first thing I said after I opened my eyes, reborn. To be fair, in my past life, Arthur Shen treated me very well. We were a harmonious couple, full of mutual respect. Yet, there was one thing that turned my heart to ice. He once told me that if he were to die, he wanted to be buried alongside a maid named Alice who had died young. He claimed Alice was afraid of the dark, and he feared she would panic alone. Coincidentally, I was also afraid of the dark. But there was only one Arthur, so in this life, I would not fight for him anymore. I would find someone else willing to lie beside me in a pitch-black coffin when we grew old. He used to say he wasn't afraid, and because he held me, I wasn't afraid either. We were about to get married. However, Arthur did not agree. I was reborn after I had already arranged Arthur's funeral. Everyone said we were a couple who treated each other with the utmost respect, deeply in love. It is true that for many years he treated me well. He once painted my eyebrows for me and took an arrow in my place. I also once stitched clothes for him and tasted poison on his behalf. From the outside, we were a deeply attached couple. However, right before he closed his eyes forever, looking at my tear-stained face, he said a sentence that felt like a knife stabbing into my heart. "Eleanor Chen, please let me be buried with Alice." Alice, the maid who died in her youth, was the white moonlight he had hidden away for years, the person he could never let go of. And what about me? I was the official wife, praised as the beloved wife he sincerely loved. Yet, until the very end, he had never thought of me. If he wanted to lie beside Alice, then when I died, where was I supposed to be buried? But I suppose that matter no longer concerns me, because when I opened my eyes again, everything had returned to the time before I married Arthur. This time, I did not wait a second longer. I went straight to find my father. "Father, your daughter does not want to marry the gentleman of the Shen family." I was originally the eldest legitimate daughter of the Chen family. Regrettably, my mother passed away early, leaving me and my brother behind as she went with the wind. Only a year later, a stepmother entered the door. My brother, in anger, joined the army. My stepmother was not close to me, but she was not cruel either. It was just that later, when father had more children with her, I gradually became an outsider standing silently on the sidelines. Neither close nor distant, neither near nor intimate. The reason I could speak up frankly to ask for the engagement to be broken this time was entirely because I held in my hand a bit of belated guilt that my father felt for me after years of indifference. Perhaps one day, while holding his youngest daughter, who was babbling and learning to speak, he suddenly saw us silently turning to leave and remembered that years ago, he used to hold me like that too, calling me Ellie. It was only at that moment that he was shocked to realize how long it had been since I last called him Father. With a bright, childish voice. It was precisely because of that belated remorse that he put his heart into my marriage, personally selecting, carefully considering, and finally deciding to marry me to the new top scholar Arthur. But now I was saying, "Father, your daughter does not want to marry the gentleman of the Shen family anymore." The rare look of joy on his face from seeing me come to him voluntarily froze, then his expression darkened. "Eleanor, are you still angry with me because I was cold to you in the past? But no matter what, you should not use such an important life event as an excuse to throw a tantrum. That boy from the Shen family was personally chosen by me for you, so why must you be angry?" I raised my head, interrupting father, my tone indifferent. Father married a new wife and had more children. It is natural to love and protect them. Occasionally forgetting that I am your daughter is nothing strange. I am not angry. My mother died early, and my brother joined the army. When I was small, I was alone and afraid of the dark and thunder. I hugged my pillow and cried all night with no one to comfort me. At that time, I sent someone to call for father. The result was just a single sentence. "My wife has just given birth to the young master. The master is worried and restless. I fear he cannot come." From that day on, I understood that I no longer had a father. Strangely, I accepted this truth a long time ago. I did not understand why he appeared sad at this moment. Did he not already have a wife he loved and his own flesh and blood children? I truly could not understand. Therefore, only when I caught a glimpse of pity in his eyes, did I softly speak my wish clearly. "I just truly do not want to marry the gentleman of the Shen family." Father asked again. "Did Arthur treat you badly?" I replied. "Not at all. He treated me extremely well. Yes, in my previous life after marrying into the Shen family, We behaved towards each other with harmony and propriety. He was always thoughtful and never took a concubine. When the court was shaken, he once blocked an arrow for me, and I tasted poison for him. We were what people called partners in joy and sorrow, never leaving or abandoning each other. Outsiders looked at us and said we had a destiny engraved in our bones, lasting for lifetimes. So where exactly did he treat me badly? If there was anything, it was perhaps that he did not love me. Just like the words he said before he passed away, when he told me to bury him with Alice, the woman he loved dearly. Eleanor, you are truly very good, and I have wronged you, but Alice, she is all alone, she will be afraid. Alice, the maid who grew up with him from childhood, eventually took the blame for him because she was framed by his stepmother. She died unjustly in humiliation, leaving him with a lifetime of regret. It reached the point where even someone like Arthur, who once stood at the head of the civil officials, let himself go just once, to be buried with a little maid. It was also he who made me, the Shen madam whom many admired, become the biggest laughingstock in the capital. And ironically, I was also afraid of the dark. But there was only one Arthur, therefore, in this life, I would not avoid it anymore. Father asked worriedly. Then why do you refuse? I replied. I just do not want to anymore. He treats everyone well, but I, Eleanor, only want a person who treats only me well. Those words sounded like the childish anger of a young girl. Father thought I was just using the marriage to get back at him, so he asked again. What if I do not agree? The orders of parents, the words of matchmakers, the principle of great filial piety pressed down. I am just a weak young woman, how could I resist? However, I just looked at him silently, affirming every word. I still have my brother. As long as I do not want to, even if I have to hide at the ends of the earth, my brother will take me away. My brother, Marcus Chen, whether in the previous life or this life, was the person who loved me the most in the world. He did not forget me because mother died, nor did he use the name of compensation to force me to marry someone else. Just like right now, he had not yet arrived, but his voice echoed in advance, exactly like the many times before when he stood up to protect me. If my sister does not want to marry, then even the emperor cannot force her, let alone some new top scholar. As soon as the words finished, I looked up in surprise. Brother. But he did not come alone. Behind him were two people. One was a person who had not yet had time to take off his armor, following closely in my brother's footsteps. The other had a handsome appearance, a scholarly demeanor, and a face like jade. It was clearly Arthur. As soon as my brother saw me, his face, tanned from the borderlands, suddenly broke into a smile. Eleanor, I received your letter and came immediately. You just do not want to marry, right? Then do not marry. I have risked my life at the border for so many years. If I cannot even protect you, I might as well smash my head into a block of tofu and die. His words became bolder and bolder. When father saw Arthur, he immediately shouted. Do not be foolish. Do you know this is an already arranged marriage engagement? How can you say cancel and just cancel it? Moreover, Eleanor is a girl. If she is rejected by someone, what will happen? Father is not wrong. My brother coldly interrupted him, his voice carrying little respect. He turned his gaze to the person standing silently. But what if both sides do not want it? Mr. Shen, what do you think? Hearing this, Arthur slowly raised his head. With just one look, just that one glance, I knew he had been reborn too. In the previous life, we were husband and wife, but in this life, one hesitated to advance, and the other was relieved to let go. I took the opportunity to continue. Mr. Shen naturally has good fortune. Now that he has passed as the top scholar, I imagine he no longer values a mediocre woman like me. If you came to break off the engagement, then it is better to choose today. Arthur, do you really want this? Father looked at him, asking in disbelief. Arthur just looked at me silently, and after I said all those words, I only lowered my head to stare at the stone floor beneath my feet. After a long while, his Adam's apple moved slightly and he spoke softly. Yes. I did not know why he hesitated for so long, but fortunately, he finally agreed. My father was completely stunned. Just a short while ago, when he went to the Shen family to discuss the marriage, his family had insisted they would only marry me, that there were no chambermaids or concubines in the house, and promised firmly that after the wedding, they would treat me like a jewel and never change their hearts. Yet now, those promises of the past were easily denied by the person involved with a single sentence. When my stepmother arranged this marriage, she never discussed it with me. Everything happened due to a misunderstanding. To be honest with you, Minister Chen, I have a maid who has been by my side for many years. I do not want to let her down. Arthur spoke every word clearly. It sounded cold, but every word was like a knife carving into my heart. He was also reborn, and furthermore, he had made it back before the moment Alice met with her accident, saving her life. In the previous life, if Alice had not died, he would absolutely never have married me. In this life, Alice was still alive, so naturally, I became the person to be let go of first. Clearly, I had guessed this outcome long ago. Yet when I heard him say it with his own mouth, I still could not help but laugh at myself. Everyone praised Arthur as a man who valued love and righteousness, but who would say a word of fairness for me. He said he wanted to be buried with Alice because she was afraid of the dark. However, why did he not think about how big of a joke his living official wife would become the moment those words were spoken? Initially, I thought my son would stand by my side, but the child Arthur had raised single-handedly only frowned at me. Father treated mother well all his life. His only regret was this matter. Why must mother be so jealous? What is wrong with fulfilling father's wish for once? He even solemnly organized a joint funeral for Arthur and Alice, causing all of Jinling to gossip and turning me into the biggest clown at the end of my life. It was also on that day that my brother, now in his twilight years, personally took a whip and beat that boy terribly, then waved his hand to welcome me back to the general's manor. Arthur is an ungrateful wretch, and he raised a son who is just as weak and unrighteous. Do not think that just because my sister is dead, she has no one. You still want to be involved with this Shen family. Ridiculous. My general's manor has a huge fortune. Can we not even support one sister? Just like in the previous life when he heard Arthur say those words, my brother in this life could not hold back and rushed up to punch him. Good for you, you beast. My sister is unparalleled in the world. Who do you think you are to dare look down on people? You dare not decide your own marriage, hiding away back then. Your stepmother hid the marriage for a day, but she could not hide it for half a month. Now that the wedding is set, you turn around and want to cancel it, letting my sister suffer humiliation. See if I do not beat you to death. But I only wanted to break off the engagement, not cause a murder. Seeing my brother fly into a rage, I hurriedly stepped forward to stop him. Unexpectedly, he swung his elbow, and I was almost thrown to the ground. Fortunately, someone behind me supported me. Following that was a soft laugh carrying a teasing tone. Alright, Marcus. If you accidentally beat him to death, your sister will probably have to remain a widow instead of breaking the engagement. I was startled and looked back. The arm that had just supported me had already withdrawn. I only caught a glimpse of a side profile and a smile that seemed to be there yet not there. The person sensed my gaze and mischievously winked at me. I hurriedly turned away, my heart suddenly beating half a beat faster. In my heart, I involuntarily thought, how can there be someone so rude? In the end, Arthur was not beaten to death. He was injured, not heavily but not lightly either. It was just that by this time, I no longer cared. As I was hurriedly collecting the engagement letter to leave, I suddenly heard his voice behind me. Do you really not want to stay for even a moment? Eleanor, I know it is you. My footsteps paused. I turned my head to look at him. Mr. Shen, what do you mean by that? If you have also been reborn, then you should hold on to your Alice tightly. Why bother with others? Since it has come to this, I will help you fulfill your wish, and you fulfill mine. From now on, the two sides have no relationship. Men and women are different. How long does Mr. Shen want me to stay? If this matter spreads, you already have someone in your heart, so it is fine. But I am not yet engaged. Must I live with the reputation of being rejected? I did not mean that. Arthur spoke hurriedly, a trace of shame flashing in his eyes. I did not truly dislike you. In the previous life, at first, I treated you only out of responsibility, but after so many years side by side. I was slightly stunned. Not waiting for him to finish, I immediately interrupted. You say that because you did not save Alice in time. He opened his mouth to reply but hesitated. Alice was almost fine now, so what else was there to say? Or did he want to keep both, seeking the so-called blessing of having both a wife and a mistress? I adjusted my mood, looked at him seriously for the last time, and spoke clearly word by word. Mr. Shen, the matters of the previous life are like smoke. Although you had someone else in your heart back then, apart from the joint burial that caused me to lose face, you did not mistreat me. In this life, you were beaten by my brother, so consider us even. From now on, let both paused for a moment, then softly replied. All right. I spoke softly again. Goodbye, and goodbye means farewell forever. I pushed the door open and walked out. In my heart, I calmly thought that there was nothing left to hold on to. Jinling was truly small. Small enough that in my past life, Arthur and I just bumped into each other and were entangled for a whole lifetime. But Jinling was also truly large. Large enough that when fate ended and love dissolved, even if one deliberately searched, one could not meet again. I hugged the engagement letter to my chest, rushing to find my brother. Unexpectedly, as I turned the corner, I crashed into someone. The engagement letter fell from my hand and landed on the ground, right where he stepped on it. Not only did he step on it, but he also twisted his foot slightly, yet the culprit acted as if nothing had happened. He casually supported my shoulders, his voice carrying a hint of laughter. That is the second time. Miss Chen. He chuckled softly, tilting his head to look at me, his voice teasing. If there is a next time, I am afraid I will start thinking too much. I started, waking up from my daze. I hurriedly pulled my hand out of his and stepped back half a step in defense, my eyes wary. I did not mean to. This person did not look like a decent person no matter how I looked at him. He acted generous and forgiving, waving his hand slightly. I forgive you. I puffed out my cheeks and gritted my teeth. This kind of person, smiling with his mouth while stepping on my engagement letter, was not trustworthy at all. He asked as if he did not care. I do not yet know the young lady's name. I carefully replied. Eleanor. As I spoke, I secretly calculated a way to retreat. He smiled with narrowing eyes, leisurely announcing his name. Alexander Gu. Before I could understand, he lowered his head, enunciating every word clearly as if carving them into people's hearts. Alexander Gu. I am Alexander Gu. He spoke every word as if he wanted to carve every stroke into my heart. But that name was not strange to me. Whether in the previous life or this life, the reputation of the fourth prince, Alexander, had always resounded. The current empress had no children. Aside from the second prince who was raised by her side and became her confidant, the most outstanding person was the fourth prince. His mother died early, yet he was brave and skilled in battle, with strategy surpassing others. My brother also formed a deep friendship with the fourth prince, thanks to a time he charged into the military camp. It was just that in the previous life, that prince had met with a disaster in a great battle before he could shine, and then died for his country. Because of this, my brother was heartbroken for a long time. Once, he unintentionally mentioned it, his voice unusually quiet. At that time, I did not know how to speak flowery words, I was just afraid you would be sad. Every time you wrote a letter, he helped me reply. At that moment, I suddenly remembered. After father married my stepmother, I almost considered my brother my only relative. Every time I wrote a letter home, I could not suppress my longing and told him everything, big and small. From learning etiquette to seeing a blood moon in the garden for the first time, I hid nothing. At first, I was afraid my brother would find me annoying, but he did not. The reply letters were always full of stories, from trivial matters in the military camp to a newly tamed horse, to a cricket he had just caught. Only matters regarding my brother himself were vaguely mentioned. But every word was neat, every line was written with care. Except for the last letter. The writing style changed. The handwriting was clumsy and sloppy, clearly belonging to someone else. It only said, "Good sister, wait for your brother to return. I will take you to meet someone." But I could not wait. My brother returned carrying the body of Alexander. The fourth prince died on the battlefield. The following year. Well, do you recognize me? Alexander lowered his head, half smiling, his eyes intently watching my stunned expression. I started, waking up from the stream of memories. Hearing his question, I shook my head slightly and replied politely, "This subject greets His Highness the Fourth Prince." His eyes darkened slightly, seemingly a bit unhappy, and his voice became colder. "There is no need to be so polite with me. But is there not supposed to be a distinction between a subject and the royal family?" I was momentarily surprised, a hint of doubt appearing in my eyes. He turned away, placed something on the table next to him, and then slowly walked past me. I asked reflexively, "Your Highness, what is that object?" He replied briefly, "Crickets." I froze. In the letters exchanged with my brother, I once wrote that when he returned, if he missed me, please bring me the best fighting cricket. It was a promise from a long time ago. When my brother walked in, I was still staring blankly at the two crickets in the box. He told me that Arthur had already been chased away by him. He insisted that his sister had never reached the point of being unwanted. There were countless talented young gentlemen in all of Jinling lining up, just waiting for me to glance their way. Even if I truly did not want to marry, he was willing to support me for the rest of my life. As for father, my brother only laughed coldly, calling him a hypocrite. If father had truly cared about our mother and us siblings, how could he have the heart to remarry and father so many other children? Speaking of this, he suddenly looked at me and carefully probed. Eleanor, what do you think of the fourth prince? My heart, for some unknown reason, suddenly skipped a beat. I looked up. Why do you ask that? Brother, you are the person least capable of hiding things from me. The more you try to beat around the bush, the more obvious it becomes. He reached up to scratch his head, his guilty conscience clearly visible. I was just asking casually, asking for myself, not for anyone else. He explained that Alexander was not supposed to appear so soon. It was only because I suddenly sent a letter begging my brother to help me break off the engagement. Clearly, my brother was my flesh and blood relative. Yet Alexander was even more eager than my brother, taking the initiative to come along, and the timing just happened to coincide. At this moment, I pondered for a while, looking at the wooden box containing the 2 carefully raised crickets, then slowly replied. The fourth prince is a very good person. I had originally meant it only as a polite remark, but who would have thought my brother would be genuinely overjoyed? In recent days, he constantly shoved money into my hands. One day he told me to go to the cosmetics shop to buy more rouge. Another day he said the Fragrance Tower had a new opera troupe, performing very well, and wanted me to go watch to relieve my boredom. The excuse was very nice, saying it was to help me relax. Of course, if I did not coincidentally run into Alexander every time I went out, perhaps I would have believed him. As for Alexander, he made no attempt to hide anything. Every time he saw me, he smiled as if everything were truly a coincidence. Miss Chen, what a coincidence. Truly a coincidence. Every time I stopped to glance at a hairpin, not long after, someone would bring it right to my hands. The opera piece I liked the most just happened to be playing on the very day I went to watch. The first coincidence is called chance, the third is intentional, but by the 7th time, it is a conspiracy. Finally, I could not bear it anymore and turned to ask him directly. I have just broken off an engagement. Your Highness repeatedly making our connection known like this. Are you not afraid of outsiders gossiping? Actually, from the moment I broke off the engagement with Arthur, I knew that in the coming months, I would not be able to avoid gossip. But compared to spending a lifetime with him, those rumors are nothing. However, Alexander did not avoid it at all. Hearing me mention the rumors, he seemed to suddenly wake up. Oh, is there such a good thing? Ah, I had spoken so clearly. If he continued to pretend not to understand, it would be truly unseemly. I sighed and softly reminded him. Your Highness, I may look dignified and gentle on the outside, but it is actually a pretense. My nature is not that of a magnanimous person. He did not change his expression. A person who does not want to be hurt naturally does not need to be magnanimous. Being ungenerous is the right thing to do. I spoke again. But I still have many rules, he replied calmly. Coincidentally, I like being managed by others. I had to take a step back, emphasizing, Your Highness, I am afraid I am not a suitable person for marriage. He was not angry, only smiling in response. Suitable or not, we will know once we try. I was choked with words, looking up at him in surprise. He just curled his lips into a smile. Eleanor, I raised those 2 crickets with great difficulty. The journey was rushed, yet I still carefully protected those little creatures. If I said he did not care, I would be lying to myself. He did not force me into anything. After speaking, he left, not forgetting to help me request the exact opera play I liked best. Just as I stood silently watching his retreating figure, a voice suddenly called out from behind me, full of surprise. Eleanor. I turned my head at the sound and saw Arthur standing with a woman not far away. It seemed they had come together to watch the opera. If I guessed correctly, that must be Alice. Indeed, she was a beauty, though her figure was somewhat slender, and her appearance carried a fragile air like she, delicate enough to make people feel pity. At this moment, she lifted her eyes to look at me, her gaze both curious and wary, and opened her mouth to ask him, Young master, who is this? Arthur replied almost instinctively, She is Eleanor. She is… What was I? I was the wife who had tied the knot with him in the previous life, but in this life, everything was different. We had broken off the engagement. I smiled, my voice indifferent. Mr. Shen, the marriage contract between us has been dissolved. I hope you address me correctly. Calling me Miss Chen will suffice. He was momentarily stunned, a layer of gloom passing through his eyes. At a glance, it looked as if I were the one who had abandoned him. Fortunately, Alice spoke up to resolve the situation. Young master, I feel a bit cold. Arthur immediately said no more, hurriedly turning to find a servant to bring hot tea. Waiting for him to leave, Alice withdrew her scrutinizing gaze, then tilted her head and asked, "Miss Chen, are you the young lady of the Chen manor?" I did not answer, only looking at her silently. She let out a soft huff, her voice as light as a breeze. "Actually, the young master still has feelings for you. Although he does not say it on the surface, I have been by his side for many years, and I can tell with just one look. Ever since the engagement was broken, he has been constantly distracted and restless." Every word she said carried a tone of intimacy, as if she were already the person by his pillow. I was unclear about what she wanted to imply, so I asked directly, "What do you mean by saying that?" A trace of unwillingness flashed in Alice's eyes, but she still tried to maintain a gentle appearance. "You can rest assured. I am not like you, narrow-minded and jealous. I only want the young master to live well. I want him to be happy. If you agree to remarry into the Shen family, agree to help the young master arrange his relationships, and have the Chen family lend a hand, then I am willing to yield the position of the official wife to you. I can be a concubine." Her eyes were full of pride. "How could you understand the young master's difficulties? You cannot understand the feelings between him and me either. We are not the kind of people who cling to vain titles like you." I must say I was quite surprised. This was the first time in my life I had seen someone so generous. For Arthur, she seemed capable of doing anything. It made sense. In the previous life, she had died in grievance for him, wholehearted to that extent. "It is just, miss," I spoke slowly, my tongue leisurely but cold as ice water. "Not everyone in this world is blind and deaf. On what basis do you assume that gentleman of yours is a precious treasure so hard to obtain? Who knows, perhaps he was merely one of the options for me to choose from." The corners of my lips curved up slightly, but there was no smile in that expression. "You?" She widened her eyes, her voice trembling. "How can you speak of the young master like that? If I do not speak like that, then how should I speak? I did not say anything wrong." She elevated the person she loved to the clouds, as if he were unique, but Jinling City did not lack noble sons and royal relatives. What was a new top scholar whose official career had just begun? Perhaps because the sound of the argument was a bit loud, Arthur returned just then carrying hot tea. He frowned and asked, "Alice, what happened?" Alice's eyes immediately turned red. She looked at him aggrievedly. "Young master, she can say whatever she wants to Alice, but how can she insult you like that?" Others may not know, but Alice knows clearly. Young master has held back and kept to himself for so many years, holding great ambitions in his heart. "You are the best person in the world. On what basis does she look down on you like that?" Her words were righteous and resounding. Arthur's gaze towards me also suddenly changed, carrying a hint of reproach. "Eleanor." "No, Miss Chen. Alice is physically weak. Although her status is not equal to yours, you should not bully people too much. Breaking off the engagement was my initiative. If you have resentment in your heart, just direct it at me. After all, I am the one who wronged you." I could not help but laugh. It turned out that for so long, Arthur had always thought that I hated him because I still loved him, and that I found it hard to let go because of regret. I did not reply. He just glanced toward a figure approaching from the distance, and suddenly called out loudly, "Alexander." The person looked up. Even Arthur and Alice instinctively turned their heads to look. But Alexander seemed not to see them at all. He just walked calmly over and stopped beside me. The distance was so close it felt intimate, his voice natural as flowing water. "Eleanor." After calling my name, he glanced at the two people standing opposite us. A trace of gloom flashed in the depths of his eyes, but he quickly hid it with a faint smile. "These two are Eleanor." Hearing that form of address, Arthur's eyes wavered slightly. He looked at me, then looked at Alexander, exclaiming in surprise, "Your Highness, you too!" He naturally could not fail to recognize Alexander. It was just that he did not expect the fourth prince to be standing next to me, standing very close. Alice completely failed to understand the implication in Arthur's words. She still muttered in dissatisfaction. "What fourth prince? And she dares to say she is a lady of a noble family. Look at her now, she has no propriety at all, unmarried but openly associating with men, truly not keeping to her duty. Indeed, she is not worthy of the young master." Her words were unrestrained. She did not know what she had just said, nor did she realize the consequences. After that sentence rang out, Arthur's face also paled a few shades. He finally shouted softly, "Alice, stop talking." But it was already too late. I lowered my eyes to glance at her, my gaze cold and calm. At the same time, the maid who had always stood silently beside me like a shadow took a step forward. Without hesitation, she swung her hand and slapped. Smack. The sound of the slap was crisp, neat, and decisive. Indeed, she was the person my brother personally chose for me. Not only did she know how to hit, but she also hit at the right time. Her voice was cold, articulating every word clearly. The fourth prince is a distinguished guest of my young lady, and also a confidant of the great general, the young lady's eldest brother. Today was merely a chance encounter in a public place. Their conduct was open and upright, in accordance with etiquette, without a single part exceeding the rules. Not to mention you slandering someone's honor without cause in public, just the fact that there is a distinction between ruler and subject, yet you, as a servant, dare to be rude to a prince, is enough to warrant punishment. Alice held her cheek and cried out in terror. Her beautiful face was now red and swollen on one side. However, the gentleman she defended with all her heart could only lower his head, awkwardly reaching out to support her. Funny enough, remembering to hit Alice, I forgot who was the person who deserved a slap more than anyone. I raised my head. At that moment, the maid beside me changed hands and slapped Arthur straight in the face. Smack. Lacks discipline. The crime is even heavier. I stood still, not moving. I only curled my lips slightly, speaking coldly. Mr. Shen, do not forget what etiquette and status are just because you once stood in a high place. This life has changed. He thought he was still the head of civil officials like in the previous life, but currently, he was nothing more than a scholar who had just passed the exam, and his official position had not even been discussed yet. Seeing Arthur being hit, Alice, whose tears had not yet dried, panicked and ran over. She hurriedly supported him, looking painfully at the clear handprint on his face. Those large, round, lovely eyes stared wide, looking at me with indignation. How dare you hit the new top scholar? She pointed angrily at the maid beside me. She is nothing but a lowly servant. Correct, I am a servant. The maid's voice remained calm, neither fast nor slow. There is no need for the young lady to remind me, this servant knows her status well. It is just that this servant once held the position of a female official in the palace. Half a month ago, the general personally requested an edict from the emperor to bring this servant back to care for the young lady. This servant has humble learning and shallow talent, but still believes she is capable of handling a rude person who commits majesté. A female official from the palace was not a nameless little maid, but one requested by the great general himself. Such a person either had a prominent background or outstanding ability. Either way, she was not someone the current Arthur could casually touch. Hearing this, Alice's face turned pale. She stammered, unable to say anything before being interrupted by the person beside her. Alice, stop talking. Arthur still retained a bit of rationality, stopping Alice in time before she could utter more insults. He stood firm, but the red mark was clearly printed on his left cheek. Yet he only looked at me quietly. My gaze was indifferent, completely unwavering. If it were in the previous life, just a scratch on his skin would have made me frantically send someone to find a doctor to brew medicine. At watching over him all night without rest, at that time he would only smile helplessly, whispering, "It is just a small wound, why make such a fuss?" But back then, he had added another sentence, his voice low. "It is a bit sad. It is just that you being like this is very similar to Alice." His words were unfinished, and his eyes at that time were extremely complex. Being busy looking for medicinal herbs, I did not hear clearly. When I asked again, "What did you just say? Which is Alice?" he only remained silent and shook his head slightly. But now he had gotten his wish. The person he thought of day and night was finally by his side, hurting for him. It was just that his gaze still rested tightly on me, seeming to expect something. Unfortunately, he was waiting for the wrong person. I was not moved, nor did I look back at him. Eleanor had always been selfish, only treating her own people well. What was a man who had broken off an engagement in my eyes? He was nothing. A sense of loss rose within him, but this time it was not for Alice. In Arthur's eyes, the light suddenly extinguished, a trace of self-mockery appearing. He bowed his head in salute. "Just now, it was my maid who was rude and spoke offensively to your highness and Miss Chen. It is all Shen's fault. I hope your highness will be generous and overlook it." "That is correct. It is his highness." From beginning to end, Alexander did not say a word. He just stood there quietly, neither blocking nor stopping, silently allowing the maid to act, and even allowing her to open her mouth to lecture. Arthur was not afraid of me, but he was afraid of him. If Alexander were truly angry, he would be easy to deal with, but it was precisely this kind of silence that made people tremble with fear. Arthur broke out in a cold sweat, Downstairs, the opera troupe began to raise their voices. The clear sound rang out like silver bells, but in the loft, the atmosphere seemed frozen. Right at that moment, a soft chuckle rang out above our heads, causing Arthur to look up warily. He only saw the person opposite slowly leaning toward me, his voice light as a breeze yet clear in every word. "This play is your favorite. I heard that they changed the lead actor this time. I do not know if you still like it." I took a sip of tea, thought slightly, and replied, "It is still very good." He took up the conversation as a matter of course, his hand naturally pouring another full cup of tea for me. His long, narrow eyes narrowed slightly, the corners of his lips raised, dropping a comment. "If you do not discard the old, how can you have the new to replace it?" Tilting his head, his gaze glanced past Arthur. His smile remained gentle, but it was cold to the bone. "Do you not agree, Mr. Shen?" The man who had fought on the battlefield, even though he was now settled in one place, still could not hide the blood-chilling killing intent between his brows. A soft sentence made the surrounding atmosphere suddenly sink. Arthur calmly faced that gaze, but what he saw was me sitting next to another man, intimate and relaxed, so natural that it was much more harmonious than when I was with him before. He did not want to believe it. Clearly, I was the one who should be by his side. Or more accurately, I was originally his wife. Why was the old thing left behind? But behind him came the choked sobbing of Alice, pulling him back to reality. It was still that pitiful, soft voice, always consistently protecting him. "Young master, let us not beg them anymore. They are relying on their power to bully people." If it were before, he would surely have felt his heart warmed. But right now he only found it extremely stupid. In front of a prince, yet she dared to open her mouth rudely and openly argue back. If this happened in official circles, it would be no different from inviting disaster upon oneself. If it were Eleanor would never be so foolish. She understood the rules, and she understood when to advance and retreat. "Eleanor." A call choked bitterly in his throat. He lowered his head to swallow the rising bitterness, gritted his teeth, and replied, "Your Highness speaks very truly." As soon as the words fell, Alexander glanced at me, regretting that he did not see any reaction on my face. He raised his eyebrows, smiling yet not smiling. "It seems Mr. Shen still understands the times. It is just a pity that the servant by your side has been taught poorly. If both master and servant are rude, it is due to the master's indulgence. Let it be so. Mr. Shen will take 20 strokes of the rod as punishment on her behalf." Alice, who was just passionately dissatisfied, seemed to freeze upon hearing this. Her whole body drained of strength as she slumped to the ground. A moment later, as if suddenly recovering her senses, she no longer cared about etiquette. She hurriedly threw herself forward. "It is my fault, it is all my fault. Please do not blame the young master. Your Highness, please punish me instead of him." For the first time, hearing someone ask to be punished, Alexander had to chuckle softly. He waved his hand. "What is the rush? You do not need to be idle either. Since you have so many words to say, go to the laundry bureau for 3 months. Once your hands are busy, your mouth will surely speak less." "Your Highness, that cannot be." Arthur could no longer maintain his calm upon hearing this, interrupting in a panic. When he himself was sentenced to caning, he could stand still without speaking. But hearing that Alice had to go to the laundry bureau, he immediately became anxious, frantically pleading. "Alice is physically weak. That place is full of hardship, how can she endure it? Moreover, her words were only a bit improper. Accidentally offending Miss Chen does not warrant such." "Does not warrant such." Alexander's voice suddenly turned cold as frost, a flash of anger burning in his eyes. "They are all women. She knows clearly how important a girl's reputation is, yet she opened her mouth to slander indiscriminately. You say that her having to wash a few sets of clothes is excessive. Then what about Eleanor? Because of the rumors caused by the two of you, how much gossip she has to bear, how many people point fingers at her." Alexander's voice was like a blade, every word hammering down without mercy. "Arthur, on the day the engagement was set, you did not open your mouth to say a word of refusal. Half a month later, you dared to bring up breaking the engagement. From then until now, do not say you have not heard the slander filling the sky. If you knew, why did you let your maid continue to pour oil on the fire?" Arthur choked, his face pale. He tried to force out a sentence, his voice trembling. "The Chen family has great power. Eleanor has always been generous. She will not hold a grudge." A look of confusion flashed through Arthur's eyes. For the first time he was no longer as steady as before. "It is just a broken engagement. At most, she will be scolded a few times. The Chen family will certainly not let her suffer. Moreover, in the previous life, she was so tolerant and understanding. Surely she would not mind those gossips. He thought this way, but he forgot a simple truth. He was a man, so a few words of gossip could not harm him. But what about a woman? Just one sentence was enough to be engraved for a lifetime, etched deep into her very bones. Even in my previous life, until the moment I pretended to be weak and withered away, rumors still circulated outside. They said the Prime Minister's wife, supposedly virtuous and gentle, was nothing but a hypocritical mask, reciting scriptures with her mouth while hiding a dagger in her heart. Otherwise, why would her husband be buried with someone else after his death, while I was sent back to my maiden home to be buried in a cold, desolate backyard? For any woman, that was a humiliation that could never be washed away. It was a wound, a joke told by the world for generations. At this moment, hearing those words from Arthur, I finally stood up from my seat, cutting through the singing echoing from the stage. Arthur. He watched as I approached step by step and softly called out, "Eleanor." Smack. A resounding slap, his face turned completely to one side, his eyes empty. My voice was like ice and snow falling straight into a person's heart. "You should be the one to die." I thought my heart would no longer tremble after 2 lifetimes of suffering. Yet at this moment, it hurt to the extreme, hurt until it shattered. Before my eyes was the person who once held all my hopes in the previous life. Now, I turned and walked away, without any lingering attachment. Alexander immediately dropped everything to follow closely behind me, casually throwing back a sentence. "Add another 10 strokes of the rod on behalf of this prince." It was strange. When the female official from the palace hit Arthur, he only felt physical pain. But when it was my turn, a single slap was enough to make his head buzz and his ears ring, his mind in chaos. The sound of Alice crying still did not cease beside his ears, but in that instant, Arthur grasped his last bit of reason and shouted desperately, calling for Alexander. "Your Highness." Alexander acted as if he did not hear. Arthur hurriedly shouted loudly. "The second prince asked Shen to inquire about your Highness's health recently." Just one sentence made the person's footsteps pause. Alexander turned around, his cold eyes sweeping over Arthur. The look was like thunder and lightning, dark clouds filling the sky, a gloomy aura instantly covering the entire courtyard. The emperor was in his twilight years, and the 2 princes were secretly fighting. Although the second prince, Victor Gu, was a son of a concubine, he was raised by the empress. In terms of status, he should have been the crown prince. If Alexander's achievements were not so illustrious, making the imperial court lean to one side, perhaps there would be no contest. Because of this, in the battle for the throne, neither brother was willing to yield to the other. And everything started with a letter home that I wrote to my brother. In the letter, I only mentioned one sentence: if a city asks for reinforcements, absolutely do not let Alexander lead the army personally. Instead, he should go around to the rear to investigate the truth first before considering action. I was not being paranoid. It was because in the previous life, the second prince won the world, thanks to that inescapable trap. That request for reinforcements was originally a trap ready to swallow Alexander whole. Victor calculated carefully, using the lives of an entire city as bait, just waiting for Alexander to soften his heart and refuse to let go. He would be trapped in the city and buried there. Regrettably, I only understood these things after I was reborn. Fortunately, in this life I had time to remind them. My brother and Alexander both became suspicious, sensing something abnormal, so they did not lead troops to provide aid. Because they did not go, the second prince's conspiracy vanished like smoke, and the people in that city also escaped disaster. Later, Alexander also guessed the reason, but he did not make a big deal out of it, nor did he directly expose the second prince. He just quietly returned to the capital, not confronting him directly. Therefore, at this moment, when Arthur mentioned the second prince in front of everyone, it was no different from stabbing a knife straight into Alexander's face. He was telling everyone that he had chosen a faction and secretly stood on the side of the second prince. One word cut off all retreat. If he were punished now, it would be no different from directly confronting the second prince. Arthur also felt regret. He should not have revealed his stance so early, but his Alice was standing on the edge of disaster, and he had no other choice. Victor. Alexander curled his lips slightly, his smile frozen like ice. "Are you threatening me, Arthur?" Arthur tried to remain calm, clasping his hands and bowing his head. "Shen absolutely did not mean that. It is just that Alice is physically weak." Before he finished his sentence, the teacup on the table shattered. The long sword at the prince's waist was already pressed against his neck, the cold blade tearing a thin line of blood at his throat like silk. Alice was so scared she held her breath, not daring to move. Arthur's back was already soaked in cold sweat. "Arthur." Alexander's low voice rang out like thunder in a clear sky. "You are heartbroken because your Alice has thin skin and cannot stand a bump, while I have guarded a heart for so many years, was almost cuckolded by you, and on top of that, had to watch her endure all kinds of slander because of you people. What do you think? Relying on flattering Victor, do you think you are qualified to fight on equal footing with me?" His voice became colder and colder, his eyes sweeping over both the person and the sword, oppressive to the extreme. "You chose your side yourself, so do not blame me. Remember this debt." Arthur choked on his words. In the next second, the sword flashed, and the decoration at the door was slashed, falling with a crash. The prince who had fought on the battlefield for many years, his voice now echoed with killing intent. The new top scholar Arthur, behaving rudely, daring to offend his superiors, lacking proper upbringing, received 20 strokes of the rod, plus the large wooden plank, and that maid Alice must go to the laundry bureau, and you will follow her there for me. He chuckled coldly, his voice like ice. A's for Victor. The long sword in his hand was thrown straight to the ground, the sound of metal hitting the floor piercing the ear like thunder exploding in the spring sky, making listeners tremble without being cold. Him. What is he worth to dare bare his fangs and brandish his claws in front of me? Everyone rumored that on that day at the Heavenly Fragrance Tower, the new top scholar had angered the fourth prince to the point of shaking the heavens and earth. Not only was he punished with a caning in the middle of the courtyard, but he was also banished to the laundry bureau. Losing all face, it was an unprecedented humiliation. Fortunately, the second prince finally heard the news and rushed over, barely managing to take the people away. Since then, the two princes who were outwardly harmonious in the past were now clearly hostile like water and fire. However, the emperor, whose eyes and ears were usually open to everything, pretended not to know, never expressing an attitude from beginning to end. On the contrary, during the morning court session after that, he broke precedent and issued a decree transferring Arthur to work in the second prince's residence. At the same time, he turned to ask the fourth prince, who had triumphantly returned to the court, if there was anything he wanted to ask for. The fourth prince did not beat around the bush. He immediately knelt down and spoke resonantly. "Father, your son has a joyous matter and begs father to grant a marriage." The virtuous daughter of the minister's manor, Miss Eleanor of the Chen family, with a dignified appearance and elegant demeanor, was the person the fourth prince personally requested the emperor to grant a marriage to become his official wife. That day, the court was as silent as a sheet. The officials were caught off guard. No one expected the fourth prince to take the initiative to make such a request in the main hall. The reason was simple to say, but it shocked the people involved to the core. Because although few people knew on the surface, the second prince's faction knew Eleanor's father better than anyone. Minister Benedict Chen had supported the second prince for years. Not to mention, the young lady of the Chen family was once the fiancée of Arthur, and the current top scholar was also a person in the second prince's faction. Yet the emperor did not change his expression. He laughed heartily. "It is rare for you to actively beg for something before we. The eldest daughter of the Chen family, we have also heard, is a dignified and gentle person who knows etiquette and righteousness. Since it is so, we grant it." As soon as the words fell, Minister Benedict Chen's face turned pale in an instant, and the new top scholar Arthur could not help but reveal his loss of composure. "When my father returned to the manor, his face was so gloomy that the people next to him did not dare to breathe loudly. My stepmother was openly cold to me, her tone full of reproach, but because there was a palace maid from the inner court by my side, she could not criticize me too excessively. I do not want to speak harshly, but Eleanor, you are too willful. As a daughter, marriage matters have always been decided by parents and matchmakers. It is not your turn to decide for yourself. Yet you did not discuss a single word with your father, and even took it upon yourself to become engaged to the fourth prince." Speaking of this, she became even angrier, unable to suppress her rising voice. "Do you know you have caused a great disaster? How can your father explain this to the second prince? You can be impulsive all you want, but what about your younger siblings? What about your younger brother and sister, what will they do? After all, was that new top scholar not a very good choice? It is all because of your arrogance that you insisted on breaking off the engagement. I smiled slightly, the smile touching the corners of my lips but carrying no warmth. My stepmother and I had always been like river water and well water, never interfering with each other's business. She had never been too harsh on me, but she often skimped on my allowance, and good things were always chosen by her own daughter first. But that did not mean she had the right to lecture me in place of my biological mother. Madam, you are speaking a bit too much. You have never sincerely cared about me before. Even if I did something wrong today, it is not your turn to scold me. As for whether I discussed it or not, Madam says that, but have you asked clearly? I shifted my expression slightly, finally blooming into a genuine smile. Brother. My brother hurriedly returned. He had not even had time to take off his armor, before immediately stepping forward to block me. His voice was calm and steady as a mountain. Eldest brother is like a father. My sister discussed this marriage with me. The fourth prince is a person worth entrusting a lifetime to. Since the two sides share mutual affection, I naturally agree. I do not know if father has any instructions. Years passed quickly. The young boy who went into the army alone to protect his sister had now grown into a tough man, strong enough to face his father. He shielded me from the wind and rain, causing even father to be somewhat wary. The female official beside me reminded me softly. Minister Chen, currently the eldest miss, is the princess consort granted marriage by the emperor himself. If the minister acts rashly, I fear it is not appropriate. Father paused. He was old now, no longer possessing the prestige of his youth. He did not care much about his two eldest children before, but the later children were spoiled by him to the extreme. Even regarding the division of family property, he once said that since Marcus had achieved merit, the property should be left to the younger sons. Marrying me to the newly passed top scholar meant that if his official career went smoothly, then as his wife, I could rely on that to find good marriages for my younger sisters. He had calculated very carefully. A pair of son and daughter was enough to support the entire piece of the family. If they conveniently leaned towards the second prince's faction, then the other children would also have smooth sailing in the future. However, ironically, these very two children refused to listen, and he could not lay a hand on them. He could only grit out each word full of resentment. Eleanor, Marcus, you two are truly unfilial, daring to disobey your father. Himph, it seems his judgment of people is not bad. Who told him that we siblings were born with rebellious bones? Leaving the front hall and returning to the courtyard, my brother asked me, "Are you really willing to marry the fourth prince? You already asked me this question the day before he went to the palace to ask for the decree. Brother always worries that I agreed because of him." Clearly, my brother knew Alexander was not someone who forced others, but as long as it concerned me, no matter who it was, my brother would not trust them easily. Your brother and the fourth prince are old friends. If you refuse, it will not affect the friendship between the two of us. You do not need to worry for my sake. I smiled and shook my head slightly. Brother, I am willing. It is true that there is a part because of you, but the greater part is because I genuinely want to. Alexander's feelings had never been hidden. On the contrary, he was so frank that others could not ignore it. I also once thought that if I did not marry him, I could still marry another decent person. Considering it, that might be much easier. But then I looked at the crickets he carefully raised, and the items that were brought to me after I merely glanced at them. I thought about how he punished that person for me, not hesitating to turn against the second prince. Finally, I could only sigh softly. At that moment, he hurriedly returned, acting generous to comfort me. That Arthur is not a good thing. I have already punished him. You absolutely must not be soft-hearted. The world does not lack good men. Who knows, perhaps a truly good person is right in front of your eyes. I had no other intentions, but his words were unfinished, the implication in every sentence clear as day. I opened my mouth to call Alexander. Alexander? Ham. He immediately raised his head. I looked at him and said calmly, "Let us get married." That sentence made the fourth prince, who was seasoned in battle, freeze. He was stunned for a long time, as if struck by lightning in broad daylight. You want to get married? You must get married to them. With you, I laughed. It is Alexander. Finally, he reacted. You want to marry me? I nodded seriously. If you do not want to marry. Who said I do not want to? He jumped up like fire touching straw, pacing back and forth, flustered. Getting married. Right, we must get married. In a few days, no, tomorrow is best. The sooner the better. I have to go prepare, I cannot delay. You wait for me for a moment. He acted as if he were afraid I would suddenly change my mind. As he ran out the door, he kept turning his head back, his eyes seeming to want to keep me fixed in place. That appearance made me laugh out loud. Your Highness, you seem to have forgotten one thing. He stopped abruptly, turning his head to look at me, bewildered. What thing? My father is wholeheartedly on the side of the second prince, and you and the second prince are like water and fire. If you come to propose, I fear father will not agree. So what if he does not agree? As long as you agree, everything is easy to solve. Alexander waved his sleeve, his voice full of spirit. Father Emperor likes to watch us brothers fight. If he knows I want to marry someone from the second brother's faction, he will definitely nod in agreement, and he won't forget to pour more oil on the fire. Wait for me, Eleanor. Tomorrow I will get an imperial edict granting the marriage for you. He walked so fast he almost crashed straight into my brother who was coming from the opposite direction. As soon as he saw him, Alexander could not help but hug Marcus tightly, leaving my brother stunned. He laughed loudly in a joy he could not hide. Marcus, I am about to get married. Marcus raised his eyebrows. Getting married is great. Which family's young lady is it? Speaking of this, his gaze glanced over at me standing by the door, smiling at both of them, then turned back to look at Alexander's face, which was joyful to the point of losing composure. What, you say you want to marry my sister? My brother reacted, immediately rushing over to wrestle and tease him. But he did not truly oppose it. After all, this marriage was something he had secretly facilitated. Who told him that from the beginning he did not like that scholar with the weak and feeble appearance? It was the same with Arthur in the previous life. My brother once stated bluntly, if our brother were still alive back then, that guy would not be worthy of carrying his shoes. Later, herein Alexander died in battle, my brother became silent. Finally, he carried me to the bridal sedan chair with his own hands, constantly whispering instructions on the way. See, Arthur is not very reliable, but since you have agreed to him, well, if you are unhappy in the future, just come back, brother will welcome you. I laughed and said a daughter could not stay at her mother's house forever, outsiders would gossip. Even if he did not mind, father and madam would never let it be. He blatantly declared, if they do not agree I will just set up a separate household. As if afraid I would hesitate, he was serious with every word. Sister, I no longer have a mother, I cannot lose you too. So if you marry and are bullied or unhappy, you must tell your brother. Even if I have to pierce the sky, I will bring you home. He had done it. In the previous life, he furiously stormed into the joint funeral of Arthur and Alice, causing a scene, and even personally taught my unfilial son a lesson. On that very day, he brought me back to the general's manor. From then on, no matter what gossip there was outside, he acted as if he did not hear it. All expenses for food, clothing, and medicine were always more, never less. Returning home, I lived very peacefully and leisurely. My sister-in-law was a straightforward and generous person. While drinking, she cursed both Arthur and that unrighteous son, then said, after all, it is just a son. I do not lack sons. Later I will tell them to be filial to you. We had been close since childhood, so when I took my last breath, both my brother and sister-in-law shed many tears. I just smiled and said, if there is a next life, I still want to be your younger sister. Heaven had mercy, and words became reality. Opening my eyes again, I returned to those spring days in my boudoir. And once again, it was a grand wedding. My brother was still the one carrying me to the bridal sedan chair. I used to think that in the previous life, he said those words because he disliked Arthur. However, in this life, the person I was marrying was his best brother. Yet my brother still repeated the old sentence. If you marry and are bullied or unhappy, you must tell your brother. Even if I have to pierce the sky, I will bring you home. Only then did I understand. In his eyes, as long as he did not see me living peacefully for the rest of my life with his own eyes, even if I married the emperor, he would not be at ease. My heart felt both sour and warm. I held back the tears that were about to fall, smiling and replying. All right, I will listen to you. This wedding was organized with extreme grandeur. Almost everything that could be displayed was brought out and used by him. He was only afraid the world would know that the person Miss Eleanor was marrying was him, the fourth prince of Great Yuan. The expressions of the people belonging to the second prince's faction were all unpredictable, while my father's face was completely frozen. Yet, he still chose to stand in opposition to me and my brother. When he made that determination, he said this. You siblings are still young. As a father, I naturally must calculate for your future, But after all, you are my flesh and blood. If one day you too encounter disaster, I will go and beg the second prince to be lenient. His meaning was very clear. He had bet everything on the fact that the second prince would ascend the throne. Even Arthur thought I was too stubborn. You lived a life again, clearly knowing the second prince will ascend the throne, so why are you still so foolish? Eleanor, even if you hate me, you should not destroy your own future and treat such an important life event so carelessly. Hearing this, I only found it amusing, not to mention that he and I long ago had nothing left to bind us. Even if I truly regretted it, the imperial decree has been issued, and the wedding day has been set. What is the use of him saying these words? Unexpectedly, he immediately blurted out. It is very useful. Eyes momentarily stunned, he revealed a look of joy. Alice once said, as long as I am happy, she is willing to be a concubine. Eleanor, in both the previous life and this life, I can marry you as my official wife. In the previous life, we lived very well and never abandoned each other. It should be the same in this life. I will not let Alice down, and I will not let you down either. As long as you agree, as long as you nod, I definitely have a way. His words were not even finished before I ordered men to drag him out and beat him half to death. In the middle of the main hall, I sat upright in the seat of honor, the corners of my lips curling into a cold smile. Where did this crazy thing crawl out from? Speaking nonsense, deceiving and threatening people, trespassing into someone's home, and even daring to step into the residence of female relatives. Leave him with one breath of life, but beat him hard for me. The person who let him in was also brought out to be dealt with together. Although I said that, the person who truly let him in did not need guessing. A servant accepting money was just a sacrificial pawn. The one unwilling to give up was my father. Otherwise, when I threw the person in front of him, why would his face turn green like a leaf? This matter truly caused a sensation for a while. Throughout the streets, everyone discussed that the new top scholar had character issues, daring to break into a lady's boudoir, and was beaten until he was bedridden. If my father had not stepped forward to explain that I did not know there was a guest in the house, and ordered the beating by mistake out of panic, who knows what form the rumors outside would have taken. However, Alice's fragile heart boiled with anger. She cried and screamed at the same time. It is all because of you. Now the young master is bedridden. The doctor says he has internal injuries. Who knows if there will be aftereffects? You are truly a vicious woman. You are not worthy of the young master's affection at all. Do you know? It is precisely because the young master broke off the engagement with you that the mistress of the Shen family seized his weakness, speaking ill of him to the master, causing him to be thoroughly disappointed. Fortunately, the young master is talented and was favored by the second prince. His days had just started to improve, but now you have ruined everything. You have done so many immoral things, are you not afraid of being struck by lightning? Every sentence and word tore at her throat, not respecting my status as the eldest miss in the slightest. For the sake of her young master, she was ready to risk her life, no longer caring about face. What a person in Arthur's heart. Look closely, she acted more like his biological mother. It was as if in this world, only her son was a priceless treasure. If he broke off the engagement, it was because the woman was unworthy. But if he was rejected, then those women were naturally blind and dark-hearted. I leisurely took a sip of tea, listening to her rambling endlessly. Finally, I looked up and spoke calmly. If it is that miserable, you should have told me a bit sooner. Hearing this, Alice immediately snorted coldly. You no regret now, right? It is still not too late to admit your mistake. The young master likes you and he is kind and generous, so he will certainly forgive you. But let me say this first, if you dare to bully the young master in the future, I absolutely will not let it pass. She waited for me to bow my head and admit my fault, hoping I would be afraid and soften my tone. Who would have guessed I would just sigh comfortably, smiling like a spring breeze passing by. The more you tell, the happier I feel. If he stays miserable forever and you keep coming to tell me, I will feel happy forever. Alice was stunned for a second, then transformed into a shrew, waving her arms and legs, intending to pounce on me. She had used this method of making a scene until it became boring. In the past, whenever Arthur lacked paper, ink, or food, she would run to make a scene with the mother of the Shen family. Later, whenever she saw something she liked, she learned a very useful trick. After all, you are a noble family. These things are not worth much, so what is wrong with giving me some? People in such families usually value face, afraid of outsiders looking in and laughing, so most would turn a blind eye, considering it bad luck and yielding to her. Over time, gaining benefits, she pushed further, and making scenes became second nature. It was just a pity she did not know one thing. Before, the things she demanded were worthless, so people did not think they were worth arguing over. But I am different. I am the type of person who calculates every little detail, and I hate being taken advantage of the most. Compared to being gossiped about with a few sentences, I am more afraid of suffering a loss. I tapped my finger lightly, calmly giving an order. Servants, drag her out and beat her for me. That was good. I helped the two of them fulfill their wish, letting the pair of them lie flat on the bed together. It was not until the wedding day that I understood why Arthur and Alice dared to be so arrogant. Arthur even wildly declared that even though the imperial edict was issued, he and I still had a way to turn things around. It was because the group of people belonging to the second prince's faction had secretly prepared for a long time. The day Alexander and I got married was the moment they chose to use the emperor's name to launch a coup. The other side had prepared enough troops early on, acting extremely neatly, quickly surrounding the imperial city. Looking at the troop deployment, it did not seem like merely forcing the king to abdicate. Clearly, they were taking advantage of the rebellion to ruthlessly eliminate the opposing faction. Victor no longer had the patience to wait. He captured the emperor, standing arrogantly on the high steps, looking down at me and Alexander from above. With a triumphant expression, he gritted out every word. Alexander, in the end, you still lost. Father has always hesitated, just wanting to see which of us brothers is more talented. Today I will prove to him that in terms of decisiveness and ability, I am forever a level above you. That throne must belong to me. Naturally, it is mine. Rebellious son. The old emperor still dreamed of sitting and watching tigers fight. Who expected that one day he would become a delicious meal in the tiger's mouth, playing without a chance to fight back? Alexander blocked in front of me, his hand gripping his long sword tightly. Do you know that once soldiers enter the imperial city, innocent people in the city will also be implicated, and may even die unjustly? So what? Achieving great things does not bother with trifles. Whatever, they are just a few lives of lowly commoners. If they die, they die. Sitting on this throne, whose hands are not stained with blood. Victor spoke indifferently, not caring at all. Just like in the previous life, he disregarded the lives of a whole city just to kill Alexander. What he said was not wrong. To sit on that throne, no one can avoid bloodshed. But whose blood it is, that is the point worth discussing. Whoosh! A long arrow tore through the wind. Just when no one could react in time, that arrow pierced straight through the arm Victor was using to control the emperor. At the same time, Alexander seized the momentum to rush up, stepping on the arm of a traitor, launching himself into the air. The long sword in his hand spun through the wind, plunging into Victor's shoulder. A scream of pain echoed throughout the great hall. While he had not yet regained his composure, the person who struck had already withdrawn the sword, his eyes sharp as snow and frost. The rebel leader has been captured. The rest will not be spared. Kill them for me. On the city wall, my brother, who had disappeared since carrying me to the bridal sedan chair, was now dressed in silver armor, standing firm as a mountain, giving the order to kill. In the great struggle for the throne, every day passed like living in boiling water and burning fire. How could we carelessly prepare for a wedding? Everyone was matching courage against courage, wit against wit. So do not blame the mantis for stalking the cicada while forgetting the sparrow behind. The outcome was clear. Troops raised in the imperial city for many years could not compare to the iron cavalry weathered on the battlefield. A bloody battle lasted only half a day. The situation of great victory suddenly turned into a great defeat. The fight for the throne failed. The emperor was overly frightened and passed away at Wyong Palace less than half a month later. The fourth prince took the opportunity to ascend the throne. The first thing he did was purge the rebel party. The second prince, Victor, was demoted to a commoner and granted a cup of poisoned wine. The empress, no, she must be called the Empress Dowager, voluntarily asked to enter the imperial temple to cultivate, no longer involved in the affairs of the former court and the harem. As for the faction that participated in the rebellion with him, naturally, their end was even more miserable. That Alice no longer had her usual arrogant appearance. She wanted to kneel down and beg me to save people. But at this time, I could no longer save them. After all, as the father of the original empress, my father committed a grave error. Naturally, he had to be stripped of his position and exiled. Let alone Arthur. By rights, he should not have died so quickly. According to the rules, He had to wait for the judgment to be completed before sentencing. It was just that the person he regarded as his life, Alice, still carried the familiar behavior from the previous life, hugging a bag of silver to try and bribe the Supreme Court. One must know that now was the time when the new emperor had just ascended the throne. Everyone was shrinking their necks to be human. Who dared to go against the heavens? The Supreme Court, afraid of being dragged into trouble, immediately threw him into prison. In the prison, rats ran all over the ground. Arthur could not endure it. He was infected by plague and passed away not long after. As for Alice, she was also imprisoned for the crime of bribery. She was still resentfully scolding. "You people do not understand the young master at all. My young master is a rare genius born into this world. So what if he made a small mistake? If you do not let someone like the young master govern the country, I want to see how long until you lose the nation." Those screams transmitted out from behind the iron bars, penetrating the round window at the top of the prison, and were quickly extinguished completely by the sound of joyful New Year firecrackers outside. This coup ultimately did not affect the common people. The citizens peacefully welcomed the new year, peaceful and happy. Meanwhile, the young master in her mouth was currently curled up in a corner of the prison. Before dying, he had a dream. In the dream, after he passed away, the son he had brainwashed for many years finally followed his will. Disregarding the advice of the official wife, the son buried him and Alice together in one grave. He had thought that what he did would at most cause Eleanor to be gossiped about by a few people. Who would have expected it would cause her to suffer such humiliation? Even his son resented her, thinking she was jealous, selfish, and narrow-minded. Only her brother, the uncle who had always looked at him with disfavor, openly disrupted the joint funeral between him and Alice, then without hesitation took Eleanor back to the general's manor. Afterwards, she lived very peacefully. On the contrary, his son, under his biased teachings, committed a grave error. When the son went to the general's manor to apologize, he was thrown straight out by the uncle, and finally stripped of his position and exiled far away. And from then on, Eleanor never mentioned him again. In his dream, when I passed away, I left only 2 messages. One sentence for her brother and sister-in-law. If there is a next life, I still wish to be your younger sister. One sentence for him. If there is a next life, I absolutely will not marry the gentleman of the Shen family. I did it all. At the grand ceremony to confer the title of Empress, I wore a brilliant phoenix robe, a phoenix crown on my head. Because I was afraid of the dark, my husband, the person who held me in his arms all his life, bowed his head and whispered, "Someday, when we both pass away, let me hold you like this and be buried together in one grave. I am here. Do not be afraid." True love isn't about finding someone who treats you well enough while holding another in their heart. It is about finding someone who makes you their priority. Eleanor's rebirth wasn't just a second chance at life, but a realization of her own worth. She stopped waiting for a man who hesitated and found one who would defy the world to protect her. Never settle for being a shadow in someone else's story. Be brave enough to walk away from the wrong love, for only then can you make room for the person who will willingly hold your hand through the darkness. The story ends here for now. If it touched your heart or left you thinking, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Please like, subscribe, and share Raccoon Tale to help more stories come to life. See you in the next tale.